Welcome back to Outside Views, and today we're talking about a game that the British government is losing badly. Britain playing whack-a-mole with EU red tape. And my personal view is that the dream of a seamless Brexit reset is crashing into the reality of a European Union that has moved on, while the UK is still trying to figure out which way is up. And we are now in January 2026, and the outside view is that for every trade barrier Keir Starmer manages to lower, 3 more sprout up like weeds in the garden of the single market. Negotiating with Brussels has become a frantic game of damage control, where British officials are desperately trying to whack new regulations before they crush what's left of the UK's export economy. And the data is damning. A new survey by the British Chamber of Commerce shows that 54% of exporters now say the trade deal is actively failing to help them grow. And that is a 13-point jump in frustration in just 1 year, proving that the reset everyone was promised in 2025 is feeling more like a recomplication. And I believe that the British government is essentially trying to hold back the tide with a plastic bucket, while the EU continues to build a regulatory fortress that the UK is no longer inside of. And the moles are popping up everywhere, from carbon taxes to e-commerce fees, and it's high time we look at the wreckage this is leaving behind. Let's look at the biggest mole on the board right now, the EU Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM. As of January 1st in 2026, the trial period was over, and the definitive regime has begun, meaning importers of high carbon goods like steel, aluminum and electricity now have to pay a levy. And my personal view is that this is a total double whammy for British industry, because the UK is now treated like any other third country, despite their geographic proximity. And while Starmer says he wants to link the UK and EU emissions trading systems to solve this, those negotiations are moving at a glacial pace. And until that deal is signed, British steelmakers are being bled dry by paperwork and carbon costs that their European competitors simply don't have to face. And it gets worse. In June 2026, the EU is expected to slash the amount of steel that can enter the bloc by half, after which a massive 50% tariff kicks in. And I believe we are watching the slow-motion strangulation of British manufacturing, all because the government won't admit that the sovereignty doesn't pay the electricity bills for a steel furnace. And then we have the e-commerce mole, which is about to hit every small business and hobbyist in the country. From July 1st, the EU is officially scrapping the €150 customs duty relief threshold. I talked about this in another video. In the past, if you sent a small parcel worth less than €150 to a customer in the EU, it was exempt from customs duties. Now, every single commodity code, no matter how cheap, will face a flat €3 customs fee plus whatever handling charges individual countries decide to tack on. And the outside view is that this is the death knell for UK-based small and medium-sized enterprises selling to the European market. If you are a small business owner in Manchester selling €40 handmade crafts, a sudden €5 to €10 price hike per parcel makes your product instantly unattractive compared to a local EU seller. And my view is that the government is failing to protect the little guy while they chase headline-grabbing deals with superpowers that don't even share a land border with them. And the e-commerce market is the lifeblood of modern trade, and Britain is being systemically priced out of this own backyard. And if you think the automotive industry is safe, think again. The rules of origin mole is back with a vengeance. From the end of 2026, the grace period for electric vehicles with Chinese-made batteries is finally expiring. If 45% of the car's value and 60% of the battery pack doesn't originate in the UK or the EU, a 10% tariff will be slapped on every vehicle sold across the channel. And I find it incredible that after years of warnings, the UK's battery production is still nowhere near the levels required to meet these rules. And my personal view is that the UK is walking into a tariff trap that will make British-made EVs more expensive, just as the market is becoming most competitive. The EU is already aggressively pushing its Industrial Accelerator Act to favor made-in-Europe products, and the UK is increasingly being left out in the cold. And I believe that without a massive immediate investment in domestic battery gigafactories, the jewel of British manufacturing is going to be sold off or shut down by 2027. And then there's the deforestation mole, which is a perfect example of how complex things have become in Northern Ireland. By December 30th this year, exporters of beef, coffee, palm oil and wood must prove their products aren't linked to deforested lands. And while this sounds like a noble environmental goal, the administrative burden for UK farmers is a nightmare. You need robust traceability systems down to the geolocation of the farm. And here's the kicker. They still don't know how this applies to Northern Ireland, because Northern Ireland remains aligned with many EU rules under the post-Brexit frameworks. They are in a state of a regulatory limbo at this point. And the government hasn't even designated a competent authority for Northern Ireland yet, leaving businesses there in total uncertainty, not only local uncertainty, about their legal obligations. And the outside view is that the British government is so busy playing whack-a-mole in London that they are completely forgotten to look at what's happening in Belfast. And my view is that this level of administrative incompetence is actively destroying the trust of the very people who were promised that Brexit would cut red tape. Well, we all know the truth, but still. The reality is that Starmer's reset is being treated by Brussels as a minor administrative task and not a grand partnership. And it has reasons why they're doing that. The 5-year review of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement is coming up this year, and the gap between what the UK wants and what the EU will give is a canyon, because this is just a technical review about the implementation. It's not opening that deal again. Starmer says he wants closer alignment with the single market, but no to a customs union, a position that many experts call cakeism 2.0. And my strong personal view is that you cannot have the benefits of the club without paying the fees and following the rules. And the whack-a-mole game will continue as long as the UK insists on being different just for the sake of it. British businesses are begging for a mature, stable relationship, but what they are getting is a series of recurring crises. And I believe that if the government doesn't move toward full alignment in the next 12 months, the UK will essentially become a satellite state, orbiting the EU, feeling the pull of its rules, but having zero control over the trajectory. So in conclusion, the trade barriers are appearing faster than any negotiator can remove them, because the EU is a living, breathing legal entity that keeps evolving, represented by its 27 member states that a lot of Brexiteers always seem to forget, because the 27 decide what's happening. And every time the EU passes a new environmental law or digital regulation, the UK falls further behind unless it chooses to dynamically align. The whack-a-mole strategy is exhausting, expensive, and ultimately futile. Yeah, you remember the Borg. And my personal view is that the UK needs to stop hitting the moles and start fixing the floor. And that means moving beyond sector-by-sector deals and looking at a comprehensive return to the structures that actually facilitate trade. Until that happens, the outside view is that Britain will remain a country trapped in a game it can never win, while its businesses pay the price for a political experiment that has clearly failed. The moles are winning, and it's time for Starmer to admit that he needs a bigger hammer or a better plan.